All right, you glorious accursed. We're back. It's February the 6th, the start of week 2 of the Ontario election campaign. Your intrepid correspondents, Scott Reid, Deb Hutton, and Jordan Leichnitz are here to take you through what's happening in the Ontario election, or not, as the case may be, and keep you up to date on federal political activities, of which there are no shortage of these days. So, it's a blizzard here in Toronto.
A blizzard is a little precious.
Do you need us to preemptively send the military, or do you think you'll be okay for a day or two?
Is there not like an ounce of Saskatchewan left in you? A blizzard? This is not. There is snowfall.
There's a reason I don't live in Saskatchewan, and that's the primary one: winter. Well, that and employment, of course.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, limited job prospects as a liberal there.
So, what do we got here? We got our daily polling. Today's Relay Strategies polling is brought to you by Enbridge Gas, reliable, affordable natural gas to heat your homes and power our economy. So, what do we have in the polls today? Absolutely frigging nothing. Absolutely frigging nothing. It is flat as a pancake out there. Today's rolling total is Ford 51. Crombie 22. Styles NDP 18. So I want to start off with this question, which is probably a dumb question because everybody does it, but let's take this. So right now, as I look underneath the hood of this data, I can tell that neither the Liberals or the NDP are punching through with their messages about healthcare or education at all. There's no differentiation since the campaign started on those issues. No change in sort of affinity with the parties, anything like that, based on those issues. No sense that one party would be better at dealing with it than the other. They're all reasonably tied. None of them can break from the pack. So yesterday, both opposition parties announced a doubling of the Ontario disability benefit, a policy that I think is fantastic. I do a lot of work in food insecurity, and I know how many people that are food insecure, that are relying on food banks, are disabled people, and how much we could relieve the use of food banks if we just gave disabled people a reasonable amount of money to live on. So I'm wholly in support of the policy. But in the context of an election campaign, what does it do, Deb?
Well, I don't think it does anything. And part of my challenge yesterday, it was a money day. The premier's out announcing taking tolls off the provincially owned portion of the 407 in the east end of the GTA.
Took a shot at you, item. Deb. Took a shot at you.
The premier did?
He did.
Oh,
not
God,
by
I missed
name.
it.
He said that the selling of the 407 had been a bad policy by a previous government.
Yeah. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sending you the bill personally.
Nothing new.
That's okay.
Nothing new there. But to go out and talk about both opposition leaders doubling ODSP, and we can argue about whether that is too much, but the policy generically, I think, is a good one. But not to have a price tag attached to it. I just don't understand this. Like, I thought you at least had to do a nod to how much your promise is going to cost. Now, they both say they're going to have a fully costed platform and this will be in it. But I thought that was terrible. Really, really terrible. And so I don't think it had a lot of credibility. If you scan kind of the mainstream media today, there was really nothing that lifted off the page from any of the leaders yesterday at all. I want to quibble, though, with something you said, David, which is that the numbers haven't moved, which show that the health and education message of the opposition parties isn't, having any sway. They haven't been on those messages. That's the problem. Bonnie Crombie did day 1 and 2 on healthcare. And then what's she been on? Just about everything but healthcare. And I think that's a huge mistake for them. Marit did 1 day on education. But she stepped on herself a little bit by talking about other things.
What do you think, Scott? What do you think the opposition parties thought they were going to accomplish yesterday? I mean, like, the reason I'm asking is because when you're down 50 to 20 something, you're you're not going to beat that back through incremental coalition building over the course of the next 2 weeks. You've got to break the frame of this thing somehow, right? So what do those announcements do?
I think the answer is differently for the two parties. I think the NDP can make a rational case that doing this fortifies their voter coalition, keeps their 18 to 25% on board, helps them with their internal people and all that kind of stuff. None of that helps you win the election, but I think they're probably the view that we need to own this kind of issue. I don't know what the Liberals are thinking. I mean, I would say a couple things. One is there are 21 days left in this campaign. The only way to make it different is to give people a reason to change. And we know that that's got to be wrapped around healthcare and family doctors. So I don't think that the message on healthcare from the Liberals has been specific enough or intense enough or creative enough. I think you've got to really, you can't afford to sort of say, well, we had this day blotted out for ODSP, and then we got another couple days blotted out for here. There's going to be a seniors day or whatever. You got to kill all that. You got to say, look, if we're going to go on healthcare, we're going to go on healthcare every day, and we have to be more creative how we get into it. I think one of the things is they have to let people carry them. So they have to do events where they have real people talking about their family doctor challenge, right? Like my 78-year-old mother who cannot get a fucking family doctor, who therefore sits at Gein's for 4 hours on a Thursday afternoon, waiting for the one doctor that's coming in to do some general hours. And then after that 4 hours, they put up a sign saying, no longer available to see anybody. And they all shuffle back into the snowstorm and get in their trucks and drive home. They need those stories, I think. That's just an example, but my point is they've got to be more creative, make the story more interesting, make the hook more unlayoffable for media. Easier said than done, I know. It's easy to sit here and criticize, but that to me is the issue. And then I have another question, which is nothing happening, or is nothing happening that we're seeing yet? Like, is there any hope that you're investing in something that when it breaks, it will therefore break toward you? And I don't know that I see any evidence that anything's happening. So that's what I would find dispiriting. Like, I think
I can assure you from what I am seeing that there is no at all evident chipping away of Ford on any metric that I'm looking at. Right.
And you've got to get more creative in your events and drive the message better and make it unlayoffable. And you have to spend a lot more on paid media, and you have to do that now. You can't afford to wait one day longer.
Hey, Scott, just on that. Sorry, Jordan. On that. So one of her sort of, events yesterday on healthcare, such as it was, because it was ODSP was her message. Bonnie was reading from her phone texts that she got. And one of them actually made her stumble because it said the previous government, which meant the Liberals. And so she was like, oh, I don't think that's what it means. It was a terrible moment. Like no real people talking about, to your point, Scott, about their particular challenges with getting surgery or getting a family doctor or, waiting for 22 hours in the ER with their child.
I don't think the Liberal tour is a raging triumph.
Yeah, I think that's added to the
Jordan, I wanted to ask you though.
Okay.
I have a specific frame for you because I find this so compelling. Brian Topp, after the Alberta election, was on the Herle Burley, and we were talking about it, and he was saying that they had made a decision to bifurcate their message from negative on paid against Smith, and their policy stuff was going to be delivered through earned. And in the research they did at the end of the campaign, they realized that nobody had any idea what they were proposing in policy terms. All they'd heard was the negative paid. And his conclusion was that if you wanted anybody to hear anything, you had to pay for it, that earned could not deliver a policy message anymore. So in that context, what is the point of a one-off day announcement? Like, what are the chances, even if ODSP was a vote mover, what are the chances anybody would hear it?
You're not good in the current environment. In fact, I think verging on nil. And you have to think that this environment is actually tougher than the environment that Topp and faced in Alberta, because it's multi-party. We have the Trump tariff issue running at the exact same time in the exact same media environment. So there's actually a lot that would argue for it being a more difficult environment here. And yeah, I think, look, for the NDP, the ODSP issue is an important one. There's a number of things that they need to kind of get out of the way in the early stages of the campaign because they're important for their base and they send a signal that helps, get their activists out and get everybody going. And I think this is one of them. And I agree, this is an important issue. And I was really happy to see both parties raising it yesterday. I don't know that it's going to make anybody win anything, but it is an important issue. So I think that for them, that those are the types of motherhood issues that they feel that they have gotten the tariff stuff sort of out of the way, that they have space to return to these places where they have more intuitive strength. And I think it's interesting because Kyla's numbers that she had from earlier this week, actually, where she looked at issue advantage. There is actually daylight between the NDP and the Liberals there. The NDP have between a 3 and an 8 point advantage on almost every issue except dealing with Trump. So there's something there for them to work with on those topics. But being heard is their main challenge. And this has been really the issue for the Ontario NDP since day one. People don't know Styles. When they see her, they generally like her, but it's really about getting out there. I think that the other thing that's going on, and this is just sort of speaks to the pancake flat numbers here, is that it's going to be very difficult for either the Liberals or the NDP to get any liftoff without pulling down Ford's numbers. Something has to happen or something has to be done to pull those numbers down. And I think that has to be done through paid because there's just very little chance that short of some of the unforced error stuff that we talked about yesterday, it's going to be very difficult for voters to actually hear any of those messages as they're being packaged through the daily tour.
I think there's one other factor. Can I just say?
Yeah.
And it sounds
that's
obvious.
the kind of show this is.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in and I'm going to share something that's on my mind. Actually, I'm going to put it to music if you don't mind. All right. Bobby, give me a C. Bouncy. Kiss an angel, good morning. I think Trump is a bigger factor than we even think. And I know this is complete coffee shop talk, but not only is Trump with his tariffs blocking out the sun, focusing everyone on that issue and handing Ford the huge advantage he has on that ballot question. But I think that I think that Trump is also discouraging people from watching the small amounts of earned media that they do anyway. I think I talked to one person after another, and I know anecdote isn't evidence, but one person after another has said to me in the past week, I can't watch the news, man. I'm out. I'm checked out. I can't see that orange fucker anymore. I can't. It's so dispiriting. It gets me down. And it's no one's watching anyway, but I think even fewer people are watching than normal because they've decided to check out due to the galacticized menace of Trump.
Yeah, it's sort of the cynical genius of the PC campaign at this point is that really I think it relies also on just zero enthusiasm, no, and very low turnout, frankly, across the board. And I think they may get that.
What do you think, Deb? Is this election
for the pod?
Is this election even happening?
Oh, I think so, because, people will say to me, I heard Doug talking about this. So he actually, I think, is penetrating. However people get their news, whether they've tuned out to sort of a lot of stuff, they're still getting some news about Doug because of the huge presence of Trump and the tariffs. What I wanted to go back to, though, is a little bit on the paid component. So I don't disagree that's why people, that's how people are going to get their message out. That's how the Liberals and the New Democrats need to try and get Ford's numbers down. But the first ad, which is on Newstalk 1010, for example, Scott, from the Liberals, is that he called an early election. Now it's tied to he's in it for his friends and his own job, not you.
They didn't run that today.
Stuff.
Tell me they didn't run that today.
This morning, I heard it. Newstalk 1010, trust me.
That has to be off. That should have been off.
But that's what they're running today.
She's been out also. It's not accidental because she's also folding that into every day of her tour comments, all her Q&A. They really have intentionally, the Liberals have really knitted the legitimacy of the election call very closely into their message every day.
Right. But we're one
Well,
week in. We just talked
that's
about
over.
the numbers being a pancake. Why are you running this? I don't understand it.
It's not relevant.
I don't think so. I mean, if it was a week ago minimum.
Right.
Well, it's just nobody's buying,
Yes.
right? So it's like you got to move on to something else.
Make the case for change. Being as negative as hell on Ford. Make your focus on healthcare more specific and more interesting and more creative, and rely on paid. Like I would empty the treasure chest. I would empty the wallet right now on paid. Good paid. That's hard on health.
So let me present you with a conundrum to resolve. On the one hand, Jordan said something earlier that I entirely agree with, which is that for the other parties to make major progress, Ford has to be taken down a peg. And he's got to start to, they've got to take some votes away from him, and they've got to make him shed votes to do it. So that implies negative. On the other hand, one way of looking at the data, because if you weren't doing this in a comparative context, if you were just asking Ontarians what they thought about the Ford record on healthcare, it would be abysmal, the results you would get. If you asked them about the Ford record on education, it would be bad. If you asked them about Ford record on many things, it would be bad. But when you ask them which party would be best able to handle healthcare or education, it's effectively a three-way fight. So that tells me that the opposition parties don't have that much credibility on those subjects either. Because people are capable of saying, Ford's government is bad at that, but I'm still going to vote for them because I don't really think the other people would do any better.
But I would read that differently. Like, I think that to me, that those numbers almost look like that's a pox on all their houses, right? That those are the types of numbers I think that we often see when people are just finding political news in general distasteful and depressing. And they would have lots of reasons for that in the current moment. So I think that I don't know that that holds if you start pouring paid in. I think that that's maybe just people's baseline at this particular moment.
Yeah, I don't. I think that's just rationalization. I think it's real, and I think it's a real problem. And I think what it probably tells you is that your creative has to be guided by that insight. So yes, you have to go negative at Ford, and particularly Ford personally, so you know images of him. But it probably means that you have to construct your creative in a way that delivers the healthcare message with your leader in it, so that Ford is seen as the problem, and your leader who no one knows, let's be honest, is seen as part of the solution and is identified with a family doctor for every family kind of thing, right? Like, to me, that's harder creative to pull off, and you're also robbing yourself of some of the negativity, because if your leader's there, it can't be just a full bore fire flaming crash into Ford. But I think that's probably where it shapes your creative, would be my gut.
It's great that Scott has this daily conversation with his son on the podcast.
I am not allowed by internal family statute to speak of my sons any longer on the podcast. There's been a firmly worded lawyer's letter texted to me overnight.
Cease and desist.
It's a funny lawyer.
A man has
it
no
comes from the
sons.
law firm of fuck, and off. I've been told in no uncertain terms to stop talking about my sons.
They're having a great time. That's
Yeah. The Ontario Real Estate Association, or OREA, knows more and more families are finding the lack of housing supply, plus prohibitive government costs in Ontario, are pushing the dream of home ownership further out of reach. A recent poll done for OREA by Abacus Data found that although 7 in 10 non-homeowners say they still dream of buying a home, nearly half have either given up believing they will ever own a home or are pessimistic about the possibility. That's why this week, OREA released their Ontario election platform titled A Home for Everyone 2025, putting forward pro-growth, pro-ownership, pro-affordability housing policies that will ensure future generations continue to have a shot at owning a home. From ending exclusionary zoning to tackling landlord and tenant board reform, OREA is proposing 10 bold actions to increase housing affordability and consumer protections in Ontario. Over the coming weeks, you'll be hearing more on how decision makers can implement pro-home ownership policies to end the housing affordability crisis. But for now, you can read OREA's full election platform at orea.com/platform. All right, we're going to have a new segment. We're going to have a new segment today, and it's called Do Over. and each of us has to speak to the party that we are affiliated with, and tell them something that they did wrong or something that they didn't do that they should have done. What is an error of some kind that each of our parties has made? Which one of you lovely folks wants to go first?
So I'm taking this segment really personally because I think it's designed to make Kory say, Deb can never fill in for me ever, ever, ever again. But I'll go first. I might as well.
Oh, you're the best.
I think, we've talked a little bit about the Oppo research and how it played out in the last couple of days with Ford and his hot mic moment and stuff. Yesterday, the Conservatives tried to make a moment of Bonnie in her time as mayor, talking about how she doesn't like Brampton. It's not her city. I'm being a little strong in my words, but essentially, I don't go to Brampton. That's not my city. Well, it was obviously in the context of her, being part of Peel and the debates that were happening out in Peel at the time. And she was the mayor of Mississauga. I just thought it was a bit distasteful. And then the part I really didn't like is Patrick Brown, mayor of Brampton, yes, former Conservative leader, but with a mother-in-law running against Bonnie Crombie in a riding, out defending the position and crapping on Bonnie. I just left a bad taste in my mouth. Didn't love it, and I don't think it did anything either.
Patrick Brown.
I don't think that
sober
Patrick
mayor
Brown
at the
has
end of
a
the bar.
I don't think he has a
Let's
strong.
come back to my cottage.
I mean, that story arc is one
I don't think he's got a strong shame gene when I see him do some of this
shame
stuff.
gene. Oh my God.
Scott, what do you got?
Well, it's kind of obvious, but and it picks up on the flow of the conversation. I go back to launch day, and we did pick apart it when we first launched the pod, but I want to return to it. I mean, first of all, the hats, no good. Second of all, the visual. They started on healthcare. They had the former president of the Ontario Medical Association. They're talking about the absence of family doctors. All that makes sense. But the visual was bad. It was just Bonnie and that one lone candidate. Nobody knows who either of these people are. There was no crowd behind them. There was nothing behind them. It looked like they were in a parking lot almost, standing in front of that hospital. And they were wearing those goddamned hats. So to me, I think you look back in retrospect and you go, aha, that's a clue that when they're going to wrap up this family doctors issue, they're going to have to wrap it up in more colorful, interesting paper. And so I would go back and do a do-over on that, and I would set the campaign on the correct foot. More energy, more specificity, more creativity, but stick to that message. And they should never have left that message after day one.
It's refreshing to know that there are still ironclad rules in politics, and no silly hats is one of them.
Well, except Doug Ford broke it effectively. I would say for him, no funny T-shirts, but that's a different issue.
I think he can do the hats. It's the shirts that might be an issue.
Guy's talking about, he looked like a dork in that hat. Just because somebody sold 30,000 hats doesn't make it. I mean, he did look good. He looked silly.
No, I disagree with you 100% on that one.
Do you
T-shirts
think
for
people
sure.
generally look bad in hats, Scott?
No comment.
Well, I mean, it's Rodney Dangerfield. What do you get, a bowl of soup in this hat? Looks nice on you, though, David.
Okay, so I'm going to do mine to the federal party because I think that there's been a repeating problem over the last few weeks that needs addressing. And that is that Singh and the NDP federally have taken the bait too many times on answering the question about confidence. How will they vote? What are the machinations around that? They should have answered once and stopped and pivoted back to workers' issues and things that are like far more favorable to them. Instead, they've been pulled in by the parliamentary press gallery to this endless loop of process stories. It is not helpful. It really has to stop.
All right. Okay.
You know why that's happened, Jordan? You
Tell
know
me.
why?
Tell me.
Because, and I don't know that anybody's ever mentioned this to you, because he sucks. Because Singh sucks. He's always sucked. He always will suck. You got to dump that character.
I heard from someone that better is always possible. So that's my operating.
I'm going to say the same thing to Jordan every day. 2 words, Jagmeet Singh.
Yeah.
It's the answer to every question.
Better is always possible. And in the case of Jagmeet, that is most definitely true. So, Jordan, let's stick with you. What did you see in federal politics yesterday that interested you?
Well, I think the thing that interested me most yesterday in federal politics is that it's like we're seeing it coming together almost on this tariff issue has has collapsed the distance between say Freeland and Polyev. They're out there proposing various forms of policy solutions to the tariff threat that really it's pretty tough to get a piece of paper in sideways once you strip the rhetoric away. And so I was really struck at how much the distance between those things is collapsing as we're seeing the conservatives do what I think is, as we've talked about, is potentially a pretty concerted shift. I thought it was really interesting. So Polyev going out, obviously, on a tough on crime sort of anti-drug platform makes a lot of sense in terms of resonating within his own base. Still, it's a bit tricky. It's a very skinny tightrope to walk because part of that means implicitly agreeing with some of the things that Trump is saying about the state of our border. I thought he walked it pretty well, but boy, oh boy, you can see the sort of sweat and strain of keeping that vote coalition together on his side, and you can like watch the wheels turning as they're really trying to rejig to remain relevant. So I think definitely seeing more movement, more instability on the conservative side, which says that they're feeling that ground shift under their feet.
Scott, um, just picking up on where Jordan left off there, like Carney gives this big speech yesterday and lays out a whole economic sort of framework, and Chrystia Freeland put out a statement yesterday about tariffs. And I don't think at the end of it, an ordinary voter, like I thought overall there was lots that was impressive about the Carney thing, for example, but I don't know at the end of it that an ordinary voter, had they watched it, or if they saw a clip of it, would really know what he was going to do about the tariff situation. And Polyev has this mandatory minimums for fentanyl dealers thing. I already know that. I know that now. Like I can't tell you precisely what Mark Carney will do, but I can tell you precisely that it's such a breakthrough idea. They're good at that, right?
Yeah. No, there's no question about it. And they have the flexibility of not being a government, of being able to sort of take that single thing and make it simple. But no, you're right. We get governmentitis, and it still bleeds through. That being said, my thing that I would pick out of yesterday was Carney's speech, and I thought it was interesting in a couple of ways. One, I thought, I would say overall, both in terms of substance and in execution, I thought we saw a gear shifted yesterday. I thought Carney clearly was placing the Liberal leadership quietly unsaid, but clearly, in my view, putting the Liberal leadership in the rear view window. It was not an intervention that was paying attention to what Chrystia Freeland or Karina Gould, or even what the 400,000, which by the way is a number we should talk about at some point, so-called supporters or followers or casual friends with benefits, whatever the Christ we call it now. Those people, and it felt to me like he was
hookups.
Clearly,
I think they're hookups.
That's right. They're
You only wish.
400,000 hookups. I thought
It's not
it was
a liberal
addressing-
youth convention, David. Come on.
God, those days.
Why do you
I just
think we
he was
joined?
he was thinking in terms. He'd made the curve. He'd made the shift to thinking in general about the general election. He was talking more like a prime minister in waiting, and I don't mean that in the stuffy, boring sense. I mean, like I think he is shifting the focus of his interventions now toward less about winning the Liberal leadership and thinking about how do I position myself for the general. And I thought the substance was pretty sweeping and I thought it was good. And I liked how he shut down a point. He made a point of trying to shut down a bunch of points of differentiation with Polyev. I'm taking the carbon tax off the table. I'm taking the capital gains off the table. We're going to talk about the same medium to long-term stuff. Yeah. Internal trade barriers, diversification of trade, whatever. So I thought, that was, you could see that happening. And his execution, although it still needs more electricity, I thought it seemed elevated. He actually hit his clip lines. He didn't deliver them like he was trying to rush through the sentence and get to the next thing. So I saw a little bit of a shift in his performance and in terms of the way that thing was shaped that made me think, hey, good, better. And, the guy has to learn quickly. And I thought I saw evidence of improvement and a strategic shift. So I was looking at it hopefully as a liberal. I liked it. I liked what he did yesterday.
Deb, what's your take on federal politics yesterday?
Well, I am going to disagree vehemently with both Scott and Jordan on their points. First of all, I don't think there's a seismic shift. I am going to stick with this. I know I'm the odd one out on this, but I truly don't believe it.
I didn't say there was a seismic shift. Who said that?
Jordan did.
Frank Graves isn't on the podcast. Come on.
No, but I mean, we've talked now, I think this is the third day in a row about Poilievre's folks, needing to figure out where they're going to go. I think there's some language changes that they need to make. I don't think that we're going to see a big shift overall. And again, I'm the only one saying that, but I'll stick with it. I'm riding that horse to the end here. On Scott's point, I actually watched in a way I normally wouldn't Carney's speech yesterday, because Scott said he's got to bring it, the whole bit. So I watched carefully. And my takeaway from the whole day yesterday in federal politics was fentanyl. Had nothing to do with the New Democrats, had nothing to do with Carney. It was fentanyl. Clear, easy. That was it. So I think Poilievre is still on the right track in all of these things. And he hit an issue that, yes, is attached to Trump in a bit of a way, but I think rings true for a lot of people.
All right. Well, I'm just going to present a little bit of tiny glimmer of hope for you liberals out there that are finding this to be yet another depressing conversation. That there is a Leger poll out this morning of Quebec that says that with Mark Carney as leader, the Liberals go to 38 points, the highest level they've been in Quebec since COVID.
Le bon Mark.
Well, hope springs eternal.
It does.
It
does.
All I heard was alliteration, COVID Carney.
Oh, Jesus.
But we haven't
the
heard carbon
conservative
tax
in me.
Carney in a few days. So.
I heard Quebecois. Carney.
Greetings, Canadian political pod listener. I'm your narrator, Gary, an artificial intelligence-generated voice. Exciting and serious sounding is what we typed in the AI voiceover input field. And boom, Gary exists. Hey, do you know what's not artificial? Not even one bit? The highly influential audiences air quotes media podcasts offer to its advertisers. And I say that with all the sincerity a machine learning, data-optimized, predictive network of interconnected neural nodes can muster. Whether your ad message is on Curse of Politics, the Hurly-Burly, Hotel Pacifico, or the brand new Race to Replace, you will be reaching cabinet ministers, members of parliament, the political class, the C-suite, and corporate Canada, leading journalists, and tens of thousands of engaged Canadians. People saying this is a unique political moment is underselling it. Policy is under scrutiny. A party leader is being voted on. The Ontario election is underway. There will be a new prime minister. And then there's the guy living in the White House who calls us the 51st state. Does anyone remember another time like this? I'm instantly scouring millions of data points to answer my own rhetorical question. No, you do not. This is when you need to get your message to the decision makers. Email us at contact@airquotesmedia.com. You'll be dealing with Jill and Todd, who are real, not artificial at all people, and generally very friendly. Well, Jill is anyway. We're still deciding about Todd.
All right, let's wrap it up with a blessing or a curse. John, go ahead.
My curse is to the NDP campaign provincially. And yesterday, we didn't even talk about it today, they launched a new ad with Marit. It's sort of presenting Marit, and it represents a specific strategic choice. It is not a negative ad about Ford. It really is, here's Marit, here's who she is. Let's introduce you to this opposition leader that you don't know. And I would say to her, and by extension to the Liberals, you don't have the luxury of that ad. Your ad should be about Doug Ford being a fuck up and the case for change. And so maybe you throw Marit in it, as per what we were talking about earlier. But campaigns at this point will feel a natural desire, or maybe even have an argument internally of nobody knows who we are. Maybe now we have to use our pay to introduce our leader to the public because we can't get through with earned media. And you have a choice. You can try to make the case for change against Ford or introduce your leader, but you can't really do both. And I thought that the NDP made the wrong choice, and I hope the Liberals don't make the same one.
All right.
Don't listen. Do a bit of both. Otherwise, you're going to just shake loose votes for the Liberals.
Okay, Jordan?
Well, first, I do want to throw out a little blessing to Marit and to Crombie for the ODSP announcement. Ignore these people. This is a real issue. People cannot live on less than $1,400 a month. So thank you for bringing that up. I think in so much as campaigns are rarely a time to talk about serious issues, this is one. And so I was glad to see that. Okay, but my curse today is going out to Doug Ford, who is, and again, we're still in week 1 of a campaign in which he is crushing 50%, limiting questions on his tour. Oh, no, you don't fucking get to do that. No. So Ford is out there answering questions and giving long extended interviews in the US, but can't answer an unlimited number of questions from journalists here in Ontario on the campaign trail. And look, I understand why they're limiting questions. Your guy had a couple moments. They don't want any more moments. But guess what? He's auditioning to be premier again, and he needs to be out there answering questions. So kudos to the media who are real mad about that. Stay mad.
All right. Deb?
Well, my curse is to all 3 provincial campaigns who think that they can spend gobs of money in their announcements and not tell us how much it's going to cost. I am embarrassed by that. I can't believe the media didn't push harder on it, because you can't put out an announcement like ODSP or removing tolls on the 407 and not tell people how much it's going to cost. Absolutely, I think, unacceptable for all 3 of the major campaigns.
Scott, she's a veteran of the day when platforms were serious documents.
No,
You literally
I was
beat
just
me
thinking,
to
oh my
it.
gosh, good for them for resisting.
I know.
It's
Welcome
real
to
tempting
Red
to
Book.
sit there.
She ran on one of the most serious
Hold the
platform
line.
documents ever. Right?
And it worked. And it
It
worked.
worked in 1995,
It worked,
and the
yeah,
Red Book worked, and the Common Sense Revolution, and also, the Old Testament, the Book of Deuteronomy. Those days are done.
I don't
Yeah,
care
we
if
don't
they
do
have a
pretend budgets
I,
anymore.
I don't care if they have a fully costed platform. Just tell me how much your individual announcement's going to cost. Period.
Right.
Pretty simple.
Not good news. Doesn't help you.
My message goes out to the Liberal campaign, and it's really neither a blessing nor a curse, or it could be seen as either. But fundamentally, I think you have to accept the fact that people don't know anything about you, about the leader, the party, what it stands for. So it is unreasonable with the resources you have and the time you have left to try to make people know 7 things by the end of this campaign. And so start with just making them know one thing. And that means all of your paid, all of your earned. You got to be focused on one message until you sink that. And if you're going to sell your leader, I think you got to leave it to the debate. All right. With that, I would like to thank our sponsor, Aria, and our polling sponsor, Enbridge. I'd like to thank all of you people who watched or listen every day during this pod. We're doing it for the early birds. And Scott, Deb, Jordan, thanks for being here. It was fun, as always. See you tomorrow.